Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Dealing with nightmare neighbors can be a real headache, but it sounds like our OP found a satisfying way to turn the tables. The shared driveway dilemma and constant police calls seem like scenes from a never-ending drama. It's wild how some people can be so quick to escalate things. Another crazy neighbor story. Many moons ago, I had a horrible neighbor. Our relationship died the first day we met them. It then went downhill from there. Basically, they called the police so many times that the police would knock, say hello, tell us why they were there that day, and then leave. Sometimes they actually forgot to ask us if we were doing what we were accused of, but most of the incidents involved a shared driveway. One of the worst inventions in human history. To give an example of how quick they were to call the police, we were chopping firewood and they called the police about the chopping noise on a 2 p.m. Saturday. Then our good neighbor came over to talk and said that he was replacing his old wooden fence and that it would be great if we could add it to our woodpile. So we pulled it down and chopped it up. The police show up and ask what's going on now. We point them to the good neighbor who told them that A, we were cool, and that B, he was putting up a tall new fence to keep our mutual cop-calling neighbors out of his business, as they had called the police once when he was renovating for putting construction trash for a whole day in his yard. Anyway, I did my homework and discovered that there was no shared driveway. The old woman who had lived in our house had died and they'd grassed over their driveway, and then when the old woman's distant daughter started renting the place, nobody would know any different. So not only did I call the police the next time they parked in our driveway, but I was happy to be doing it in the middle of winter, when there is a winter parking ban. The police looked at our documents, and I think with police glee, where they're super officious and don't talk like humans, and told them that if we didn't want them in our driveway, that they couldn't be in our driveway, and that we could have them ticketed and towed without notice the next time they tried parking there. The very next day, she was unloading her groceries, something she was called the cops on us doing, and I came out and said, "Move it or I'm calling the cops." She tried to negotiate, so I just started calling the cops on the cordless phone. As she came back from where she parked, I told her that next time there would be zero warning and that I looked forward to calling, and that if we ever got her car towed, that we would have a neighborhood party to celebrate. Oddly enough, that blast of revenge to the head had them sheepishly parking on their lawn for the winter, and they didn't call the cops one more time. To put this into context, this was not a he said, she said situation. They called the cops on everyone for everything. But after a while, we did start looking up the laws so that we could push them to their limit. For instance, you can run a chainsaw starting at 7 a.m. on weekdays, but only 9 a.m. on weekends. It's amusing how knowledge of local laws became your secret weapon. Running a chainsaw at specific hours? Who knew? It's a fine example of turning the tables by playing by the rules. And our second story. Rude to me over the phone? Guess I'll just take my sweet time. I used to work in a call center for a government agency that handled welfare programs. We got quite a few angry callers. I worked there for a couple of years, but this one caller stands out in my memory. She called in wanting to renew her benefits, which had ended a month prior because she missed her scheduled interview. She was pissed from the moment I answered the phone. Essentially, she wanted to know where her money was and kept accusing me of keeping her benefits. By the time I got her calmed down enough to explain that we could complete the interview that day and get her benefits started again, from that day, I was already about 45 minutes into the call. She kept complaining that we didn't call her. Bullcrap. Case comment showed her worker tried 2 times to reach her within 15 minutes of the scheduled interview time. Well, she didn't know when the interview was. Bullcrap. We send out 2 notices letting clients know that they're scheduled 1 a month before and 1 a week before the scheduled time. Well, she'd moved. She had a new phone number, too. Unfortunately, she didn't bother to call us to let us know, even though that's the client's responsibility. We're now 8 to 9 minutes into what's bound to be a 45-minute call. I again explained that we can do the interview today to get her benefits going again. She wants to know how long it'll take because she's in a hurry. Well, you wouldn't know it from the way she just wasted 10 minutes complaining she didn't know when her interview was. I tell her it takes about 15 to 20 minutes, but it can take longer or shorter depending on the case. She says to do it, but to hurry up. I run through the questions as quickly as I can. The whole time, she keeps complaining about it taking too long, asking how long it'll take, etc., etc. I tell her she can always call back or we could set up another interview, but her benefits won't start until we complete it. Now, at the end of an interview, we needed to get a signature. Benefits could not start until we had a signature. To avoid delay, we could take telephonic signatures. Basically, we recorded the section of the phone call. We had to read a long list of legal things, and the client had to state their name and the date. I had the whole thing memorized. I could get through the list in a minute and a half if I needed to. Now, with this particular client, I explain we need a signature to start her benefits. She agrees to the telephonic. I start reading the stuff at my normal, fast pace. She interrupts and asks how long it'll be. I tell her I'll go as quickly as I can, but it's important information we're legally obligated to provide. I start over. Could have just continued from when she interrupted, but I was already annoyed. She again interrupts and asks if there's another way to do it. I tell her we can get a written signature, but that would require us to mail her a paper, and she'd need to mail it back, causing about a 3 to 4 delay in when her benefits could start. No dice. She needs them today. So we go back to the telephonic signature. This time I read it as slowly as humanly possible, just above the speed of a 5-year-old trying to sound out the word discrimination. I actually watched the clock tick by as I was reading. Total time, 7 minutes and 38 seconds. She could have had it in 1:30 if she would have been just a little bit nicer. The best part is she heard you do it twice at your normal pace, so she knows you slowed down. And our last story. Evicted a horrible neighbor. I'm only vengeful when someone deserves it, and that's usually often, so I'll share one I did from 2011. I used to work in the private security field. Not mall cops, but highly trained and skilled and armed security. We worked residential buildings and complexes that were very high-end, like $200,000 cars in the parking garage is high-end. Now, places like this are Karen Central. Imagine apartments full of Karens and entitled teenagers. Now, the company owner was awesome. A cop as his regular job. He understood what we faced. His advice was to be nice, but put the hammer down if you have to, and don't take their crap. Also, that if we didn't get 2 complaints a month about us for worthless crap, that we weren't engaging the residents enough. So this is important to the revenge. Each supervisor had 10 to 15 properties under their control. Regular officers patrolled them, but we were in charge of helping with evictions, attending town halls on security issues, deciding how an officer patrols, or updating what areas are being a problem or needing checked. I had 12. Now, in this one apartment complex, we had a couple always calling us. We had an emergency line open from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. When we get there, they cry about their upstairs neighbor. It was a list of things they just changed. Stomping, music, talking, cooking smells, their dog going number 1 on the balcony and it dripping onto theirs. Valid complaints. If we found evidence, we never did. When they seen we were starting to question if they were real, they changed tactics and went racist. The couple above them were a sweet and wonderful middle-aged Asian couple. Husband was an immigrant, but the wife was a born and raised American. These cretins had only talked to the husband, so they assumed that both were immigrants. So this couple started making comments like, "Those Asians, and they're in America, why can't they cook American food?" And "I'm afraid to be in the parking garage when one of them is driving in it," and "I'm afraid to be in the parking garage when one of them is driving in it." While it angered me, those comments alone weren't enough for an eviction. Only thing I could do was have my officers put exact phrasing in the report. I did ask the property manager about the comments, and she said if they didn't say them to the residents, and the residents didn't complain, there wasn't much she could do. So I tried to think of some way to get them evicted. Not only were they lying to get the couple evicted, but they were calling in false things and wasting the officers' time to respond. And they didn't call just every once in a while. They called sometimes twice in one night, usually 5 to 8 times a week. So a month later, the opportunity was handed to me. The Asian couple called me during the day and informed me they were going out of the country, China, for 2 weeks, and no one would be in their apartment. They told me this just in case the other couple start complaining. I would know they were lying and asked to check their door once a night to make sure it was locked and not broken into. I informed the Asian couple to not tell their neighbor, none of them, that they were leaving, and besides myself, only tell the property manager. We had a patrol meeting that night. Officers didn't work one specific region, so I told them all my plan. I wanted them to respond each time they call and write down exactly what they said happened, mark the report urgent, and send it out. We had an online system for all business, email, schedules, report submitting. You get the idea. So away we go. During those 14 days, they complained 18 times. Everything was documented, and I took it to the manager. She looked it over and said, "Let's evict them." Side note, the client gets charged more for emergency response than they do for regular patrols, meaning their lies were costing more. So there was no HOA because they were rentals. In this situation, myself, the property manager, and the tenant sit down at a table. The charges for eviction are read. If the eviction is security related, then I say what violations have been broken, etc. Not opinions, just facts based on the reports, which the tenants get a copy of. Then the tenants have a right to speak and ask questions. The property manager then decides what happens next. Do they stay or do they go? So they were sent a formal letter stating they were facing eviction and had 10 days to set up a meeting. If not, the eviction will be processed. They set one up. I get there and the a-hole couple and the manager are already present. The wife immediately digs into me because I was armed. Uniforms for those situations are a dress shirt, slacks, tie, and one weapon and one magazine. Think BS like elections can be dangerous. I just politely informed her that it was my uniform and not her call to make. She tried to say she felt uncomfortable and wanted to reschedule, but the manager said this happens now or I will evict you. So they agreed to continue. Now, for legal reasons, these sessions were recorded by video. That way the tenant can't lie in eviction court or sue. In front of me were 18 reports and went over each one, time, date, who called, apartment number. I also read out each line, telling them to tell me what they feel is false and what is true. The only thing they said, the racial terms weren't true. At the end of each report, I basically said the report is accurate and the fact that tenants in apartment XYZ were playing their music too loud, but you're claiming the comments about their race are false? I got a yes answer every time. About the seventh one, I think the wife caught on. She started to complain that I was dragging it out. I just smiled politely and reminded her that this was my time and she ample opportunity to object and ask me questions, but only after I was done, and then went through the rest and let them build a defense. Then after I was done getting the admit to lies, I informed them that tenants in said apartment were actually out of the country at the time of those 18 reports, and that the tenants provided proof that they were gone, and my officers checked the apartment one time a night and confirmed that it was empty. Then I smiled pleasantly and ended my part, but the look on their face was a mix of anger and fear. Long story short, they were given 14 days. From what I heard, the judge gave them 30 until they called him names. I was able to call the nice Asian couple and let them know that it was over, and they didn't have to worry because we would no longer respond to calls about their apartment for the next 14 days until eviction came through and the bad tenants left. But they were welcome to call anytime if they needed help or have an issue. The most satisfying revenge tales are those where the villains are given the free rein to set themselves up for the fall. Beautiful. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.